So, time for another random video because I feel like it. Why not? So, I've been in the shed making things, doing projects, doing woodwork. That is what I usually do. I live in this shed essentially. This is where most of my free time is spent. So, I should probably record things more often and just document my projects. Mostly for myself. Mosquito. Today's project. Today, what I have been working on is crown boards. Now, I am a beekeeper, and I have 2 hives. I have made these crown boards. Okay, what a crown board is, in a normal beehive, in a UK national standard beehive, because there's a bunch of different types. That's the kind I use. It goes bee floor, and that's where your entrance is, and there will be a mesh at the bottom, or you can get solid board floors, but I use the mesh ones. And then above that you will have a brood box with brood frames in it, which are these. These are undrawn frames with wax foundation, wired ones, as you can see from the light. Yeah, the brood box will be full of usually 11 of these, and the bees will draw this out into honeycomb and lay all of their eggs in it. And then above the brood box, you will have a queen excluder. You can potentially have a second brood box if the colony is quite large, but above the brood area, that's 1 or 2 boxes, you will have a queen excluder, which is a metal or plastic grate or mesh that has spaces that are perfectly sized so that the workers can get through, but the queen can't. And the reason for this is because you don't really want the queen up in the area where you're going to harvest honey from. So you would like to keep her down at the bottom so you know that all of the eggs and everything are in that bottom box, and you're not going to have frames that are half filled with larvae and eggs and whatever else be young when you come to harvest, because obviously you do not want to be harvesting that. You want just honey, so that ensures that you get just honey. So then yes, you get your bee floor and entrance, you get your brood box or boxes, then you have a queen excluder, then you will have your honey supers during the summer, spring and summer, and then above that you will have a crown board, and over the crown board will go the roof. So I have made these crown boards which are half width, and the reason I've done that is, well, there's several reasons, but the reason this has come to my attention, the reason I've thought of the other motivations for making those, is because I made these. This is probably what most people will call a nuke box, a nucleus box, which is just a box for housing a smaller colony, essentially. This holds 5 frames and 1 dummy board. So, standard UK national brood frames, and then a dummy board is just a spacer, essentially, just to take up empty space so that the bees don't build comb here, there and everywhere, which they will if there's empty space big enough. So this just closes that out, and I've made this nucleus box in the style of a full-sized UK national brood box. It is the same height, it's the same length. It is not the same width. It is exactly half of a normal brood box, normal beekeeping equipment. And the reason initially that I made these is because I wanted to use brood frames for everything. Because usually you have honey supers and the frames are about half the height. They're much shorter. And the reason for this is when you take off the honey supers, which you have to do regularly, you have to check your bees weekly, or you're supposed to check your bees weekly. If you've got 6 boxes or 3 boxes, however many honey supers filled with honey, they're very heavy. They are very heavy. A normal box, I believe, can be sort of 25 to 30 kilos. So with frames that are twice as big, that's going to be heavy. If you're talking 40, 50 kilo box, that's not something, and if you've got 2 or 3 of them and you've got to lift them all off one at a time every single time, and you can't, they're also harder to lift because the bees glue everything together with propolis. They go along the seams and just seal them up to seal up their nest, which, good strategy, rather inconvenient for that aspect. It's great for, holding it together, make sure it doesn't blow over in the wind, that sort of thing. It does make it more secure and more insect proof with no little gaps. But for me, lifting things up, rather inconvenient. So I wanted to make these half-width boxes so that I could still have the flexibility of all of my frames being the same size, so that I can move them around and, take some brood frames and put them up in the honey supers, and take some honey frames and put them down in the brood box, or, just the flexibility of doing that. Now, with that being said, you do have to be careful with this method, because you have to treat bees. You're supposed to treat bees for mites. 95% of beekeepers treat bees for mites. They're a big problem. You have to treat once or twice a year, or even more than that in some places. And the reason I bring that up is some of the mite treatments, a lot of the mite treatments, you can't use while you have the honey supers on. You can't let them contaminate the honey supers. So I will have to be careful with either what mite treatments I use, and only use the ones that don't contaminate things, or use the more standard, readily available ones that do contaminate things, and I will have to mark up all of the frames that have been through a treatment, so that I don't move them around and lose track of them. I can still move them up to the honey super area, but I cannot then harvest them. I can't take the honey from in that frame. I would have to put it, I'd have to leave it behind. Let the bees keep it. Okay, and that is, so weight was the issue. I wanted to do that. I had done that for my second year, this year, but I found the boxes were far, far heavier than I anticipated. So half-size boxes are my solution to that, instead of going over to honey supers, regular honey supers, with the shorter frames, the shorter boxes, and losing my flexibility, my options. And now that I have this, and have thought about how I would use this, I realised that I could actually have I could just use this on its own without the full width brood boxes underneath. I could put this directly on a bee floor, and I could have 2 of them side by side, the same as I would as a honey super, just directly on the floor. And the floors I built, the bees can't get from one, there's no way to get from one side to the other. So, and then I could have 2 smaller hives, or even full-size hives, if I wanted to put a couple of these on stacked up, and just have 2, narrower bee hives that were both stacked up side by side, and that way I can use one roof down, one floor, one roof, and then I thought, and one crown board? Well, that's not ideal, because for starters I'd have to modify it to make sure they couldn't get from one side to the other. And secondarily, when I took the crown board off, I would be opening 2 hives at the same time that are this far from each other. And that is not ideal. It's not the end of the world. They'll scuffle a bit, probably. They won't like it. But you could power through it and deal with it, and it's just not ideal for the bees. And they will probably be a bit more riled up, a bit more aggressive, so it's not ideal for me. Although my bee suit and everything, I am fully protected. They can't get to me. I've not been stung with the gear I'm currently using. I've not been stung once, even when the bees are very upset with me. I've still it's pretty good gear. So it's not that relevant to me, but it is just more pleasant to deal with bees that are peaceful. So if I can help them in some way to not be so aggressive, to not get so riled up, if I can make an effort to not disturb them as much when I'm doing my checks, then I should. That's a good thing. You know, take care of them where I can. So, today's project was making these half-width crown boards. And I wanted them to be acrylic so that I can check the bees without actually opening them, which is very convenient. It's convenient all year round, but it's especially convenient in winter when the bees have to maintain a certain temperature in the hive, and you're not really supposed to open them if it's below 15 degrees. Obviously, the closer to 15 degrees, the less impact it has if you do have to open them for some reason. But during the winter, when it's like negative something, definitely do not open a beehive. So it's good to be able to just take the roof off and then glance in and be able to just see the top of the frames and just basically see this. And oh, is there bees between all the frames? Okay, yeah, their numbers are still there. They're still looking healthy, as I can tell. You know, it's just a numbers check really, to check that you still have lots of bees in there and that something is not causing them to dwindle. So that's yeah, that's very convenient. And that's why I've gone for the acrylic ones, which does make it much harder to make, because otherwise it would just be a piece of plywood with a border. Much easier. Whereas this, I've had to cut grooves and stuff and make it all fit together perfectly, like a mirror or a picture frame. But I'm very happy with how it's come out. It's a lot more. I'm happy with the standard of the work. I mean, besides the fact I left a bit of a rough edge on this surface, but who cares? Let's turn it around. Show you the pretty side. Pretend it's all pretty. You didn't see anything. It's all nice, new, clean cuts. I didn't leave any of the rough edges on. You know, it's all beautiful and perfect. As is all of my woodwork. So yeah. To stop me, if I do have two hives side by side, I can then open only one at a time. Brilliant. And also, if I have two of these, I want to switch and only use half crown boards, because then when I'm checking a full width hive, it will be two of these side by side, and I'll only open half the box at once. And that way, I will just be disturbing the bees less. So it's better for me. It's better for them. And then another added benefit with these is there's a hole in both. That is to put feeders on. And I have these little nifty little plugs. Got the idea for these, or discovered these, through Bob Binney on YouTube. He is a quite well-known beekeeper. Full of information. Very helpful guy. Watched a lot of his videos. But these in America are called tint plugs. In the UK they're called what was it called? A bung? Barrel bung? Something like that. And these just sit in there nicely. He uses them upside down on bucket feeders, because if you keep taking the plastic bucket lids on and off, they develop leaks, whereas these you can pull in and out a bunch of times, and if they develop a leak, you don't have to replace the whole bucket. You can just replace this, which is a few pennies. Whoops. Well, for him it's a few pennies. For me they're a little bit more, and they're a little bit harder to find in England, especially when you don't know what they're called in the UK. So they were a bit of a struggle for me to find, but I found them eventually. And they fit over these holes. And these holes are then, I use jar feeders, literally just a jar with some tiny holes poked in the lid. Turn it upside down and it creates a seal, and the bees can come up to the holes and drink down the feed from those small holes, but it doesn't just pour out. It will stay there ready for them to take down if they want, or leave alone if they want. So then I can now fit two jar feeders on one hive, or one on each on the smaller boxes, which is also another added convenience for this this little side quest I've been doing today, this little project. I do need to make another pair because I have two hives, so this is enough for one hive. these will be going on my hive on Friday, and maybe I can make another set tomorrow and replace both hives. There are some drawbacks to this. This is not a perfect thing. There's drawbacks with everything. The drawbacks that I've thought of so far: one, when I place this on the hive, just imagine this is a full width box. It's going to be something like that. Oops, it's going to be something like that, which leaves a beam running through the middle of the hive and resting directly on top of the frames. So I will have to be quite careful when I put them on and off that I don't squash bees on the top of the frame, which is going to be the kind of thing that's like, but then over time that's a mild inconvenience that will probably build to annoy me a little bit. So I do have to be mindful of that. I also have to be mindful that these are, the two crown boards are touching, that I don't knock them and leave it open for bees to get out, which spring and early summer doesn't really matter. The rain won't get in because there'll be a roof on the top of it, but it will still leave a little gap on the side where they sort of meet. I could leave a small gap on the side and the bees could use that as an additional entrance and exit. Again, spring, early summer, doesn't matter. Late summer and autumn, very bad. Lots of wasps. Late summer and autumn, lots of wasps. You have to be very, very careful that you don't give them easy access to your hives, because they will go in there and they will kill the bees if they can, especially on a weaker hive. They will, as I have discovered, absolutely decimate them and reduce them down to nothing, unfortunately. But you know, we live and we learn. Won't be making the same mistakes again, hopefully. Hopefully I can actually retain some information, because it won't be useful again and for another year. So by that time I may have completely forgotten everything I've learned, because I don't have a great memory. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's my update. Very happy. Half-size crown boards. Half-size brood boxes. Very pleased with how this stuff is coming along. And I have been rambling for nearly 18 minutes. I'm impressed with that. And now I have to watch that and watch myself talk to make sure I didn't repeat myself a whole bunch. So that's fun. But yeah, shed update number 2. Projects. Just documenting stuff and rambling. Mostly for my own sake, but if you've managed to watch this much of me rambling, get some hobbies. There's better things to be doing.